Hair and makeup, are we good? All right.
Oh, yes, we're good.
You are, me, I don't know.
Yes, we're doing awesome. So, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another conversation on creating your perfect work. My name is Renessa Boley Layne, and I just want to welcome you again to another episode. You caught us at the tail end of our banterings, and I'm actually going to leave this part in the interview so people can see that we're human as well at the beginning. But if you have followed me at all, you know that everything that I'm about is on equipping high achieving women everywhere to discover, design, and get highly paid to do work you love. And so, that could mean radically changing your career. It can mean starting a business. It can mean bringing a big idea, a mission, or a message to life. And so today we're going to be talking about the power of your story. And I often share, with folks when they're trying to find their sweet spot, that ideal role in a career business that without a doubt you were born to do, that leads to that intersection of the highest fulfillment and the highest income, like all of that is bound up in the sweet spot. And it's a combination of 4 questions. What do you do best? What do you enjoy most? What's your story, and what's the market willing to pay for? So story is critical when you're simply trying to identify your sweet spot. But as you're going to learn from our guest today, your story is powerful for so many more reasons than that. And so that said, I'm delighted to be sharing the platform today with Tony Vlahos. Am I pronouncing the last name correctly?
You pronounce it like a native.
All right. Yes. What's the origin of your last name, by the way?
Greek.
Okay. So I'm awesome. Tony Vlahos. Tony is the chief storyteller and head of brand and learning for ExecuNet. And ExecuNet is one of the most trusted brands in senior level executive job search and a premier destination for high performers who want to stay on top of their game in their careers in the world of work. Since Tony joined the company in 2007, the membership has grown from 15,000 to over 800,000 executives through meaningful marketing stories that capture attention, entertain, enlighten, and persuade, all in the course of just a few minutes. And so that's the formal bio. But I want to tell you why I specifically wanted Tony on this conversation, because we have to get to the goods and the credibility so you know why you need to listen to him. But now, I know the truth. So I reached out to Tony when I was creating this series because when it comes to creating work we love and getting highly paid for work we love, there's so many challenges that come with that. It's not just am I talented? Do I have the skill? Do I have the background? So much of it has to do with, am I authentic, and am I showing up in the marketplace as a human being, as someone who can connect to others, as someone who can move and mobilize other people. And perfect work is often about fit. And if we don't show up as we really are, sometimes we can land great high-paying roles or have a business that's soaring, and it just doesn't even feel right, and it doesn't feel good. And so Tony is a master in connecting with people, and he's a master in showing up authentically and real and really helping folks to understand the power of that within the context of career and business. And he's just got one of the most generous spirits that I've ever met. And so it was just hands down, without question, I reached out cold and was like, please come and speak to us. And with a heart of generosity, he immediately said yes. So you are going to be in for an immediate treat. Get your pen and paper handy or whatever you take notes with, because he's going to reach your heart, but he's also going to give some golden nuggets around how to leverage who you truly are in a way that can catapult your career, your leadership, your business, especially when you're making radical changes towards perfect work. So with that said, I'd like to formally welcome you and thank you again for being a part of our series.
It is my joy. Thank you so much for thinking of me, and I'm delighted to spend my time with you.
Awesome. So first of all, obviously the interview series is around creating your perfect work, right? And so I often want the audience to see, hear, and feel what perfect work looks like for other people. And so how do you know, Tony, that the work that you're doing right now is the work that you're supposed to be doing? Like, you've been with ExecuNet for a good, 12 years now, if I'm doing the math, correct? And it may not be perfect work forever, but what gives you the certainty that this is, right direction right now?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And I would say for me personally, it has everything to do with wanting to keep perfecting it.
Okay.
So it's definitely a good fit It is a place where my passion and my gifts intersect with an audience that I feel really needs that. And we can explore what that means a bit more.
Yeah.
But for me, to be in a place where I can continually perfect the difference I make, the value I create, that's everything. Because if I did that once times 12 years, or the same thing for 12 years, I get bored.
Yep.
I probably stop trying as hard. I tell myself that this is where I should be and what I should be doing. But to be able to step back and say, I'm making a difference, but what greater difference can I make? The audience keeps evolving. I keep changing.
Yeah.
How do we keep growing together? And that's where the fun comes for me.
Absolutely. So your claim to fame, at least as it relates to how I've intersected with you, is around storytelling. And there's a lot of women who might be listening to our conversation and they're like, okay, what does that mean? Like, it all began when I was 7? Like, what's in the context of business and kind of a professional sense, what do you mean by your story?
Well, it could start with when I was 7, because the message there is, who are you?
Right.
Who are you on purpose? When you show up, what do you want to be known for? How did your past inform who you are today, and how does it keep informing, if at all, the direction you're taking? So all those are part and parcel of great storytelling, which has everything to do with character and a journey and emotions and a crisis at times, highs and lows. And that's what makes us a complete experience to the people who want to be around us, versus a resume that's an 8.5 by 11 page sheet. And we'll, I guess, talk more about that. Yeah. But that's why it's important not to lose that thread and pick it up when you can, to help people fully understand your identity and where you came from, where you're going next, and relative to they, what difference will you make in their lives?
Got it. There are many times when we lead with our degrees, our skills, our pedigree, what school I went to or I graduated from, all of that, when our story, our personal story, would move the dial far more powerfully. So I want to build the case for people to understand why this whole concept of your personal story is actually relevant. Like, it's not just a nice to have skill, it's critical in many aspects of your success, especially if you're making a radical shift, to create work you love. So kind of help us understand under what scenarios does your story come into play, and under what scenarios is it powerful to use? Like, help us understand, where is this relevant?
Totally. It should always precede you. It should always be something around you. People need to feel that about you, whether you're sitting across from someone at a job interview or in front of stakeholders or at a party or anywhere else. Your identity never changes. There are things about your life that will change, but fundamentally, you're always building that story, and ideally, people are experiencing about you no matter where they encounter you. I often talk to the senior level people here at ExecuNet about their resumes, and they wonder, well, look at my degrees, to your point, Renessa, look at my degrees, look at my skill set, look at the things I've accomplished. Why am I not getting noticed? Why don't people get me? Why don't they want to be around me? And my answer is always the same. Well, it's because you're approaching your life as an archaeologist, not as a marketer.
Interesting.
And an archaeologist is someone who deals with history, who deals with the facts, who looks at the past and says, oh, look how that was. Versus the marketer, who's living in the here and the future, thinking about what difference can I make? What meaning can I create for the people I most want to touch? It's a very different mindset. And when you approach your life and your identity that way, people start to experience you very differently as an ongoing, never-ending story. And I think that's the most exciting part about being a human.
So let's unpack that a little bit, because there are obvious places where a story might make sense, right? If I'm doing a keynote and I'm trying to connect with the audience or build rapport, then my stories may draw them in or cast a wide net so everyone can understand why, how we're connected. But let's go back to your resume. because for a lot of folks, it does become the chronology of, where I've been in the history and my accomplishment and this and that. Where can you insert story? And I'm not just talking about like your source story or your star story that you're going to tell in your interview about some achievement you've had, but where is there room for the personal piece, and where should that be inserted on paper and an interview? We can probably do those two together.
Oh, I love that question. And the answer is simply everywhere. And when I say that, I'll be a little more precise, which is when you're sharing results, and it's critical when you're, especially at the higher level, but I think it's true even at other levels of employment, you want people to know that the thing you are promising to do for them, you can do, and often metrics, results, data is the best way to convey that. But it doesn't mean it's a spot that's void of storytelling opportunity. In fact, that's your opportunity to tell people and show them through a story where you started, what challenges you overcame, why something occurred to you, what difference you made, how you worked with the team to accomplish that, how you overcame conflict to get it done. That's the story part. Without that, it's just factual. It's just a data point. It might look impressive, but very important. It's not memorable. No one will say that was engaging, that was personal, that was something that I'll never forget. Thanks for sharing that. It's that difference in the story that will potentially make the difference between employment and forgetting who you were in the first place.
Yeah, right. It's interesting because when we talk about interviewing, I'll often share that it's your responsibility, meaning mine as well. It's our responsibility, put it that way. It's our responsibility to tell the market how to interpret our experience, right? And so in a resume or in an interview, we'll just talk about an interview because that's lends itself to story. But in an interview, oftentimes we'll share, well, here was this accomplishment, or this is what I did, or, I, redesigned whatever, and here was the result. And people have gotten fairly, especially at the higher levels, and folks that are listening in on this call, they understand the importance of metrics and scope and, what was the result and that kind of thing. But a place where I think people often omit is, why did I share that particular example, and what do I want you to know about me? So if I'm interviewing with Tony, and I share whatever that accomplishment happens to be in response to whatever question, I answer the question, and then I might say, well, Tony, something you may not know about me is X, Y, Z, Z, Z. And I shared this story because it's a perfect example of how I think about blah, 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 blah. Or it's a perfect example of how I connect to people in X, Y, Z way. Because I come to that conversation with whatever lens or bias, and bias isn't necessarily bad or good, it just kind of is. And so I may come with a certain bias to value what you've said one way or the other. And I might actually undervalue what you said because I don't understand it from your lens, or I don't understand what that accomplishment meant, or what it entailed, or how you showed up on the back end to actually be able to create that, right? We see the highlight reel, but we don't see the behind the scenes. Right. And so in those moments where you're explaining an accomplishment, or you're answering a story or answering a question, I think to Tony's point, it's incumbent upon you to give the context, because it gives more of who you are as the human being. And I think there's an opportunity there for folks to always insert what they want to be remembered for. So the bad thing is if you're not remembered at all, right? But then the other piece is that you may be remembered for something you don't want to be remembered for, or for something that you don't think is as valuable. But it's our responsibility to tell the market or instruct the market on how they should view and see our experiences and our background and our fit. Am I somewhere on the right track with that?
You are. I'm so happy that you brought up the context of the interview, because often for people, especially if you're not accustomed to going on interviews, or you haven't been in a long while, you're afraid.
Yeah.
You're afraid of being asked something you cannot answer. Mm-hmm. You're afraid of the stranger who's sitting across from you, and they really shouldn't be. And we can talk more about how to address that. But the opportunity there is for them to see you. The cracks is where the light often shines, and that's your moment in between some of those data points and those tough questions you might encounter. Is your moment to not leave it to the person you're talking to fill in the gaps, but for you to fill them yourself with a memorable story. If you want to get behind results and make the point, for example, that you're tenacious, you never give up. Tenacity is my middle name. Well, tell me a story of how you've been tenacious throughout your life, or at a critical moment in your life, or how you overcame a challenge that seemed insurmountable to others, but you did it. And it could be a highly personal one. It doesn't have to be a professional one, because the key is not just to be professional, it's to be human and memorable and engaging and touch that person so they will remember you long after that interview is over.
It's interesting. Yeah. Because sometimes we can spit out, well, I'm this, I'm that, I'm tenacious, I'm, whatever, right?
Resilient, right.
And so I heard from a speaker that facts tell, but stories sell, right? And so I can tell you all day long who I am, but if I give you a story about who I am, then that's going to make all the difference, right? Let's talk a little bit about bios, bios, marketing material, those kinds of things, because these are places where stories come to play as well. And what's your perspective, instruction on, because you work with a lot of executives and you work with those who are also, seeking to get to that space. How do you tell them to leverage their bio as a way of being able to tell a story about who they are?
Well, it's the same tying theme, which is it starts with you. What do you want? Who are you? What do you want to accomplish? For whom? Ideally, you've thought through for which companies you feel you can make the greatest difference. And then wherever people encounter you, this is a critical part, it's got to be a consistent experience of what you want to be known for, who you are when you show up on purpose, and that story, that identity. And once you've accomplished that, and it's often a difficult thing because, especially at the higher levels, but this is true of people with a diverse life and background, they could pull from different aspects of what they've done and say, well, I'm all these things. I've accomplished so much. What do I leave out? What I often say to people is, well, let's take a page from the marketing handbook and say, positioning is all about sacrifice. And there are things about yourself you might just need to leave out because they don't align and strengthen that singular story that will make you memorable and the person they most want to be around, whether it's as a hire or anything else. So once you've made that commitment and that sacrifice and sharpened the tale of you, then it's a matter of projecting that at different moments consistently, but respecting the medium that you're in. So on LinkedIn, for example, you will tell that story that's aligned with who you are, say in your resume, but in a slightly different way because it's not a resume. When you are prepping to go to the interview because your resume or the networking you've done has gained you that opportunity, what we tell senior level people is, don't bring another copy of your resume. They've already seen that. Mission accomplished. Check that off your list. But bring something that will help them appreciate you even more, aside from yourself and your experience with me as a human. And my inflection, my smile, the thing that excites me, you will see, and it'll be palpable to you. We have developed here at ExecuNet something called a value graphic, which is reserved for people at the highest levels, which is essentially a visual depiction of their career trajectory and the things they've done, but told in a way and shown in a way that is such a distinguishing point that it makes you instantly unforgettable to the person you're leaving it behind with. And so that's one example of how to take that story and project it through different collateral as well as social platforms and even in-person events like a networking event.
Yeah, no, I think it's an excellent point. And I think that it's interesting because part of the takeaway is deciding how you want to be viewed in the marketplace, right?
Yes.
So all stories are not created equal. And I love the point around sacrifice. Like there's so many things that we've done, and for some of us, there's so many accomplishments that we've had, and we can get tied to the accomplishment and identities connected to the accomplishment, whether or not that particular accomplishment serves us for where we want to go next. And particularly if you're making a radical shift. If I'm going from a career and starting a business, what may have been like kudos to me in my business is not going to attract my ideal customer at all. So I can tout my background and my degree all day long, but depending on what my product or service is, that's not going to move the dial for that customer. There may very well need to be a very different story that's associated with that. And just a couple of examples so people can take some application. You know, I toyed with my bio for years, you know, and sometimes the bios can be so cold and stiff and clinical, and, you know, it shows you how big your brain is, but it doesn't really connect to people. And I remember when I started changing my bio, and I led with that I was the author of this book, Fast Lane, Wrong Direction, Insider Secrets to Redesign Your Success. And in the bio I shared, I wrote that book because I was that woman in the fast lane going in the wrong direction in my career for nearly 15 years, made some radical shifts in my career, and now I do X, Y, Z, Z, Z for women, blah, blah, blah. And I went to a conference. I actually was a speaker at a conference, and I did some coaching there, and folks get to sign up with, you know, whatever coach they want. And I always, when I sit down with folks, ask, well, why did you choose me? And inevitably everyone said, because I read your bio. And it totally spoke to me. This was the person that I needed to talk to. Why? Because every woman that sat in front of me was someone who felt like they were in the fast lane going in the wrong direction. And they wanted to talk to someone who could understand being in the fast lane going in the wrong direction. Yes. Not necessarily someone who was going to get them to the next level in the career that they didn't want to be in anyway. And so it became so clear how, and I didn't put anything about where I'd graduated necessarily or any of that other kind of, or all the companies I'd worked with and all that. It was really about, here was my credential. And sometimes in your career or your business, your story becomes a big part of your credential. And I think a lot of us underestimate that. Totally underestimate that.
Completely.
Yeah. And from a business standpoint, there was a woman who, she does, what is it? Salesforce implementation for small businesses. So she goes in and she helps them with their implementation. She helps them get certified, but she does it for small businesses and nonprofits. And there's a difference between doing it for the big guys and doing it for the small guys. But when you go to her website and when you listen to her, if you listen to her and speak to her, you can hear her passion and why she does this work and why she wants to do it for this particular client base because of this. Like, she's just so passionate about it. But if you go to her site, there's not a picture of her anywhere. There's nothing about that story. There's nothing that's compelling. And the reality is, if a small business or a nonprofit saw that and saw her heart and saw that story, all day long, they choose her because she gets them and she's going to hold their hand and she gets what it is to be a scary small business and trying to start it up. Like, that story is critical, even in that marketing piece. So what Tony's talking about is so real and it applies all over the place. So.
But to add to your point, which is a brilliant one, Renessa, is it may not resonate with everyone, and that's okay. In fact, that's better.
Yeah.
You don't want to be middle market. You don't want to appeal to everyone. If you're precise about who you are and you're connecting with people who get you,
yeah,
that's more than enough. And you know what we will all experience on the way to selection is rejection, you know, and that's cool. That's all right, because it says, I haven't found my audience yet. I will find it. I will stick to who I am. I will project consistently what I'm about, the difference I can make, the value I create. And when you do that and you follow the channels, you will get to the people that get you.
I think I love that. In our first conversation, you said that actually, and I wrote it down and I was like, oh, we got to say that again. I think for a lot of us, when we get that rejection, and I don't say if, I say when, because we're all going to get it for all kinds of reasons, there's this instant thought that, well, maybe who I am, my story, my background, my whatever, maybe who I am is not good enough. And then we go back to the drawing board and we try to refigure and rejigger who we are. And then we show up in the marketplace like, do you like this one? Do you like version 2.0? Do you like version 3.0? What could be problematic with that approach?
Well, that's a popularity contest. That doesn't mean I'm the best me you can experience. That means I've shaped myself to be popular to as many people as I can reach. And the problem is that quickly turns to generic. That quickly turns to, I'll do anything just to get somewhere. And you'll find initially, well, I got somewhere, good. But eventually and soon enough, you'll realize I got to the wrong destination. They didn't really understand me. I sort of faked my way in, or otherwise sold myself short because I wasn't focused on what is most compelling about me.
No, I think that's incredibly important. I've heard you say that a story must have soul.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Love that question. Well, it's your spirit, right? It's the thing that makes you both human and divine, in my view. The human part is the vulnerability part. I'm frail, I'm imperfect, and I'm going to tell you that story of myself, and there'll be flaws, and there might be moments where I failed. Ideally, I didn't repeat the same mistakes, but I've learned from them, and that's why I haven't. And that's incredibly honest, and I think that's soulful. Then there's the divine part, in my belief, which has everything to do with what difference you want to make for the people around you. And it doesn't have to be a universal consciousness kind of moment, although it's lovely when that is, but relative to the difference you want to make for, say, consumers that a target company reaches, you can still make that a divine aspiration. And what I'm saying is believing in the difference you can make and the people you can touch, and through very practical ways, make a difference in their lives. I think that's the soulful, divine part for me.
Wow. I like that. Like
Okay.
oh my God, I was like, I like it. And I like it because that's the essence of why we work anyway, right? Like there's a certain set of population you kind of work to eat. Like you work to live, you work to pay your bills, you work whatever. For the women that are listening on this call, there is a desire and a draw for meaning and for purpose and for fulfillment and for something bigger. And if that's what we want, whether it's through the vehicle of a career, a business, a mission, whatever, then we've got to show up and be willing to have a point of view, right? To take a stand, whatever that stand. I'm not my stand. I don't mean that you're out there protesting. I mean, just having a belief system. Like my stand is I believe every woman deserves to discover, design, and get highly paid doing work they love. I think dream job and broke do not coexist. Like I believe that you can do that. That's my stand. And so when we think about these elements of soul, yes, there is, I just believe that the marketplace is craving authenticity, like a cool glass of water, like it's refreshing. And it's not that you're coming into the conversation from a disempowered place, like I'm just so broken. No one's going to hire you for that. No one, whether it's a hiring manager or a customer, but it's coming from a place of here's what I've overcome, and here's what I've been through, and this is what my imperfection makes me greater, or what there's the greatness in that imperfection, right?
Yes.
There's beauty in that. And being able to honestly tell that story from a place of power is so empowering, and it's so attractive. And I'm having this conversation with you because I hear it from people. I don't hear it from people. And I think it's a huge asset for why the market wants you and why it selects you. And it has very little to do, not very little, but has less to do with the skill. Once you get to a certain level, everybody's got the same skill. Everybody can code or do whatever it is that you're required to do, the prerequisites of your job. But coming from a place of aspiration, I think, is also amazing as well. And what's your dream for this consumer? What's your dream for this client? What's your vision? Like, we all need hope. And I think this is awesome. This is awesome. But here's the question though. What have you found that keeps people from connecting to their story? Because I imagine when you start this work with people, the conversations are difficult for them, or they're confused, or I don't really know what I can say, or I don't think it's valuable. Like what are the underlying reasons why people find it difficult to connect to the story, and then also to stand in the power of their story?
Yes, well, it includes the things you just touched on, which is, I don't know where to start. What do I leave out? What do I put in? How do I shape it? But there's also, I found something more fundamental underneath this, which can create a point of friction for people that my company helps them work through, which is, I don't want to call it strictly fear, but there's a fear of excavation, of getting in touch with someone who's underneath all the things that you've layered on top of who you really are. We layer on our job titles. We layer on years of experience, MBAs. I've read too many times, I'm a results-oriented, innovative team player, lead with conviction. Well, who doesn't? You know? So underneath all that is another person who you truly are to excavate. It doesn't mean that who you are doesn't surface and manifest in the things that we just talked about, but it's the person underneath all that stuff and those trappings that I believe people desperately need to see and want to experience and get to know and connect with. And that's the work that fundamentally needs to be done, certainly at the higher levels where we operate here at ExecuNet, but I believe it's true of everyone. And I think it's that getting underneath that. And I'll make one more point. I found that having worked with so many men, it is especially difficult for them to excavate. And as I often kid with them, exhume from their corporate persona the real life human being that lies underneath, waiting to be experienced and discovered and really make meaning for others. And there's this story, I'll call it a lie, that we tell ourselves when we achieve certain plateaus in our careers or in our lives, which is, what got me here will keep moving me forward. Having a GPA, having an MBA, having all the metrics in the world, that is what I need to project and nothing more. I don't mess with a successful formula. And I will challenge it every time and say, it's not enough. If you want to keep growing, you've got to keep showing people who you really are. And you've evolved along the way. Surely from the time you got that MBA, you probably had a family, experienced the joys and the losses and everything else, and both professionally and otherwise. That's a part of who you are now. And tell us how that's informed the direction you can take our organization, because there's got to be a great story in there. Otherwise, you're not the leader that we really need. So I believe that's part of what gets in the way. It's this lie that this is what it's about. It's just by the numbers. And sometimes working outside those lines is definitely the way to go.
I hope as folks are listening that they're thinking about their own lives and they're thinking about the diamonds that are in those experiences. And some of them, to your point, are personal experiences, not always professional, because it does inform and it influences how we show up in the marketplace for our, in our career or our business. And I find that oftentimes our stories are just the opposite of what you've shared. They lack soul, so we come out, we're fake, we're always winning, we're always certain, we're always secure,
Right.
When in reality, we are secure and we are certain and we are winning, but it's not because we've always won and things have always been certain and things have always been secure. We learn to be secure in the midst of insecurity. We learn to be stronger in the midst of things falling apart. So there's just such a richness in getting in touch with who you are and what has shaped who you are, and bringing that to the marketplace is really, it's like your ace, it's the ace card, right?
Yes.
So the obvious question I think for many women is, how do I go about discovering my story? The one that isn't, to your point, proven ability, right? So what questions can women begin to ask themselves to create their own story?
Yeah, and not to discount proven abilities, because having the skills and the experience and the metrics to back that up, that you've made a difference elsewhere and it's measurable in all the right ways, that's important. But deciding for yourself, who are you going to be, is that cosmic question. And I know it sounds sort of, out there, but it never changes. And it's something that we always have to ask ourselves, because we change. And to be able to say, well, I've gone this far in my journey and accomplish this.
Mm-hmm.
What have I not done that if I didn't do would be a disservice to people around me? I'd like to think of it that way. If I have certain gifts, I haven't shared them, then how do I incorporate those into my next step of my career journey?
Mm-hmm.
And that's often a fine place to start because it also shows us gaps. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I've delivered a lot, but I haven't done these things.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to make that a part of what I want to do next? I've done it in my own career here at ExecuNet. Technically, I'm the CMO.
Mm-hmm.
It's a misnomer because I've made it so. You know, if I stuck to the job description, they would have never hired me because that's not the role that I could have done that way.
Mm-hmm.
I remember telling our founder, I won't do this job. It's a fine attempt at a job description, but I'm not this person.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm the person who will get you to the results you want. But this is how I'll get you there.
Interesting.
And you start there, and once you've delivered against that, as I said earlier, you keep finding ways to perfect what you're about and what you deliver. And so my job has come, because I've included it in my role, to do interviews and talks, create content, be out and understand people in a way that sitting behind a desk sending bullet points of marketing copy would never accomplish. Because it's what I am, not just what I do. And it's certainly helped the company grow in the direction it wants to.
Wow. What's powerful, I think, about what you said, and I hope, and I want to highlight it so people don't miss it, it's that when we understand fundamentally who we are and what we bring to the table and how we want to influence change, then we have the confidence to speak freely and to also be able to even craft opportunities that fit us, right? Because that's effectively what you did with the CMO role. It's like, hey, you know, that's not me. I can get you the result, because at the end of the day, we've got to bring the value. We've got to get the result, right? How we get there might be very different depending on who we are and what we bring to the table. And a lot of us are trying to dance a jig and kind of fit all the boxes that someone else has put out there. And oftentimes hiring managers are doing just the best that they can in what they think they need. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but they may not recognize that you bring this piece that they'd never considered, but is exactly what's needed to take them to the top, right? And so when you understand and can appreciate and own that, then you can go into these conversations and you can influence what your role looks like. Yes. So something that may have been 80% perfect work for you, you can go in and have a conversation, rejig, influence from a place of value so that it's now 95% perfect work or 100%, you know, whatever it is. But you got to know that about yourself first and really understand that value. I think that's really, really critical.
Yes, and I want to add to what you just said, which is so brilliant and important, which is knowing yourself. And often, certainly self-awareness is a critical starting point when you want to begin shaping and telling that story. But often we don't see ourselves the way people around us see us, which is why we so encourage, not just as a nice to have, but a must have for our senior level executives to work with a coach, to work with someone on the outside looking in who has worked with people at your level who've gone through similar frustrations and shared aspirations that you do, and are able to look at you in a way that maybe you don't see yourself, and construct someone who is actually who you truly are, but you've overlooked for too long. And I think that's, I'm glad you said that, because it's so important when you're struggling to find a starting point to say, well, who am I really? And it's just a very basic question. It's so difficult to answer on our own.
Yeah, but here's the deal. If you don't know that, you're going to struggle, especially if you're making a major transition, because the confidence won't be there to step out in the market in the way that you need. I know for me, when I first started stepping into the space of business, I did not know who I was. And as I look back over time, who I am now is exactly who I wanted to be back then. but I didn't know who that was, and I didn't have confidence in who that was, and I didn't believe that the market would pay for who that was. And so I kind of, sort of chased the check, like what's the market willing to pay for? I'll be that,
Right.
and in being that, I was so uncomfortable being that, and I deliver, but it was hard to deliver. And so understanding, so there's a few questions that I've written down kind of from this conversation. Who are you on purpose? It's a question I heard you say in another podcast, and I remember writing it down. But who are you on purpose? Like when you are on purpose, who is that person? What are you about? Like at the end of the day, in the world of work, what are you about? What do you stand for? And again, stand for is not standing on the corner with a picket sign, talking about hell no, we won't go. It's not necessarily that, but what do you stand for people, for customers, for in this nonprofit idea? Who are you trying to be a champion for? What's your point of view about? So within your world of work, within your industry, whether it's AI, artificial intelligence, whatever it is you do, what's your point of view about that? What's your vision for? And Tony mentioned that earlier in our conversation, being able to go into interviews and networking conversations and informational conversations and really being able to aspire towards a certain vision that you have that other people around you may not, and then what has influenced or shaped your perspective on something. I was talking to a woman the other day, and, she was talking about what she wanted to do, and she was a Black woman, in her early 30s, and she wanted to create some nonprofit or organization that would help other students who were coming from HBCU institutions as they up level into the professional market. And something that happened to her years ago when she was an intern someplace, one of her colleagues at the time told her that she didn't belong there. And he was like, you do know you don't belong here, right? And it stuck with her. And everything that she did from that point forward was about proving that she belonged someplace. And so she was in a role that was wrong direction for her now. She didn't want to be there, but she stuck it out because someone told her 15 years earlier that she didn't belong there. And so everything she did, it was like, I don't quit because I got to, prove that. But that shaped how she's made decisions professionally. Right. And being able to tell, like I was so impacted by that story because I could still see the pain of when she told the story, but I could also see how it affected every decision she made. And so if she's going and helping young people, young professionals of all backgrounds to really be able to thrive, that story is going to hit home with so many people because a lot of them have had people tell them something or another about what was possible for them, right?
Yes. It's a great example.
So as Tony has shared, like this is so powerful what he's sharing because, oh my gosh, it will draw the ideal customers to you. It will draw hiring managers who are like, she's the one for us. And it would allow us to stand much more powerfully in the market and with greater confidence, right? Mm-hmm. And so as we begin to close out, in Tony's continued spirit of generosity, he has offered a free gift for those who are listening in. And there's a subset of folks for whom this is going to be perfect for, and I'll let Tony share about that, and then I'll talk about how you can actually access it. But I'll go ahead and give the floor to you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So as we've discussed, Renessa, my audience is people at the senior levels, vice presidents and above, a lot of chief executives, lots of people in the C-suite, many of whom are in transition or soon will be because they're thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so our real strength as a brand as a service offering at ExecuNet is connecting them with people who have the answers, trusted advisors. They include coaches and strategists and executive level recruiters who work with hundreds upon hundreds of people at their level and help them go further, faster, and land that role. And it's done through the approach that we've developed here that I alluded to earlier, which has everything to do with telling your story and being able to shape it and get market ready and go to market. So the offer is for people listening and watching at that level who want to make those changes happen for themselves. Connect with us. through a phone number that I guess Renessa will share. And we'll offer you an hour with this person, this strategist who will talk to you about what you want to achieve and offer their trusted view of how to move forward faster. And that's it.
Awesome. And so on right next to this video on the page, you're going to see all of the details and the link and what you need to do to be able to access that call. But if this applies to you, take full advantage. Like, connect to this organization, learn from them, connect to other people who are doing what you're doing. Like, there's just such a wealth in being connected. And as we talk about building stories, so often other people see us, as Tony said, in ways that we don't see ourselves. And so I am thrilled, delighted, honored, humbled, and very appreciative of you taking your time to share with us and to equip us in different ways. And it is my hope that folks have been refreshed and challenged and inspired and all those other conflicting emotions in good ways. But I'll speak for Tony as we say, we wish you all the best to your success and happiness, and everyone have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we are